Welcome to B2B Tech Mindset, where we explore how technology drives business success. Join us as we discuss the latest software solutions, trends, and strategies that can help you stay ahead of the curve. Develop a tech mindset and learn how to leverage technology for growth in your organization.
Welcome back to the B2B Tech Mindset podcast. And today we are finally back after a break of almost 3-4 weeks. I don't know. That was a long time.
But it was a long time, yeah.
But we are back, and we want to continue with the subject that we were touching last time, which was user interface. And we had a lot of points in the agenda, and we barely reached the half of it. And today we want to continue. We want to resume what we were discussing about, because I think we think that's an important subject that we should discuss and bring to an end. And on top of that, I have to wish you happy birthday, because today, I know it's your birthday. It says we are recording this on the 3rd of July. So you don't have to say how old you're getting or how young you're getting now. But with that being said, we can just jump right into the UI UX user experience topic. And I think last time we were discussing inconsistent design. So can you go back a little bit and remind us what was the whole story about having designs that are not consistent across the board? What is that?
Yeah, thank you for the congratulations, by the way. Now you put my birthday out there, but it doesn't matter. So inconsistent design. So what does it mean in the context of UX for a software as a service product or an enterprise product? It means that the system behave inconsistently when you're doing the same tasks. It means if you have to upload a document in different part of the system, it should work the same way. So you have to set the same visual where you drop the box where you drop the file. It should look the same all over the system. So inconsistency is you have a small button in one part, and then you have a big drop area in the other, and then you have a different thing where you put the path in a URL or something like that in another part of the system. So that is an example of inconsistency. And with that, it gets more detailed, like if you have wizards, for instance, like step-by-step guided flows, and you always use like the details always goes in the first one, when in the second one you have a little bit of a deeper configuration, and the third one other thing. So if you alter that order, that is inconsistent across the system, then the user will definitely have to learn a new screen, have to learn a new flow, and that will increase like the friction of the user, because if you learn one thing, you should be able to apply it across the same system. In the end, it's one product, so people expect that it behaves the same all over the place. Yeah,
that's interesting.
That is basically inconsistent design.
It's interesting because I was thinking, I don't want to name companies as usual, that's our policy here, but yes. I was thinking about certain websites, especially enterprise websites, that they embed other websites inside of them for different capabilities, different functionalities. And you can notice the difference between design. So I think many of these SaaS solutions that they are supposed to be white label and should be transparent and should be fully customized, they are sometimes not. And that leads to inconsistent experiences. So when you are navigating in a portal of a company, they have a certain corporate identity, and that includes the selection of the font or the color scheme that they have, or the different components that they use for different functionality. And now suddenly you are in a section of that website, whatever that is, and then suddenly you realize, oh, this looks different. This is suddenly different. Yeah. And sometimes it's bearable, especially if they just plug in on the top of the website, they have the logo, and then they have the same colors, but then the experience feels a little bit odd. And I can recall going through different services or websites of companies and feeling this oddness, this thing that it just doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
And I think people don't really put a lot of attention to that thing.
No, on it goes deeper than that. So I have encountered like we are all working, for instance, we were all working in the same team. We have our design guidelines, so our visual design guidelines, how the buttons should work, how the flows should work, etc., etc. We have designers. And still, you have to have somebody to pay attention to the consistency. So you cannot let loose the designers, starting from the designers, the part I know. So you cannot let loose the designer, let alone the developers to do that. So nothing against the developers who have design skills, but it's usually not the case. So basically you cannot let the designers alone because they will figure out a new pattern and they will forget that the same flow or the same pattern is used in another place in the system. So you have to have somebody taking care of that. It's like, hey, you are doing this actually looks similar to what we did in this other feature. We can reuse that dialogue, or we can reuse that flow, or we can reuse that layout or whatever. But yeah, it's definitely an important thing. When I'm talking about a couple of teams working in the same product with pretty good specified design guideline. So if you get out of that framework that I just described, the usual thing is most of the companies don't even have a designer. So they are using Bootstrap or whatever UI library they find suitable for their technology stack, or they like the design or whatever reason they decided. When they use that, it looks kind of the same, but then the flows are different. So the components are different, have different size. And then for the same information, you have different fonts and different font sizes, different colors for errors, for instance. Sometimes you display the error in black, or you display the error in red with an icon, without an icon. So those small details will increase the cognitive work that the user have to do to understand what is seen on the screen at that moment.
I think it also helps a lot if, I mean, it's a challenge because on one side, to have a common language across the application and for people to have a unique user experience, you need certain level of centralization and certain level of coordination among all teams that are working in a product, especially if it's a big product. But
yeah,
on the other hand, then just struggle with the flexibility that the team has and the ability to be agile and to work on itself. I think a way to address this is to have a central repository of components and to agree that people agree, we are using these components or these visual elements, and you should use this stuff. You should use what we have here, and we will agree that this is the information that we use. And I think that's the first step. And obviously you have also QA. So many companies, they also don't have in place a QA process, especially in the early stages, but this is also an area that QA can definitely cover. So there are obviously functional requirements for the application, but there's also all these user experience requirements, or the experience part, the design part. That is also something that QA should look after, but certainly it's not always the case. So I've seen that especially when people is allocating time. I recall I was talking to a friend of mine who he does QA. I think we could have him at some point in the podcast. And he was telling me that when you are creating the estimates, it's about 25% of the time. So you have to put 25% of the time that you already use in development on top of the planning that you want. And then for many teams, that's simply not acceptable. They want to ship because they think, well, we are feature complete. This is we are done. But then you have the users going through all these nightmare experience that nothing looks coherent.
Yeah.
However, I also believe that it depends strongly, especially in the SaaS space. It depends strongly on what kind of product you're building, how bad your customer needs that product. And I think it's a fine line that we all have to walk. If you have a solution that is very unique and your customers really need it, and it's strategical, probably you can sacrifice a little bit in the experience, but for most of the other products, I think makes sense that is enjoyable, or at least it's not confusing and can lead people faster to their goal.
Yeah. So totally agree with those points. Basically, if you have a complex system, the user will take more time in doing their tasks, and that means that they will do less tasks in the time they are working with the system. If you have a slow system, before your worker, when your employee goes to get coffee, when he thinks in the next task, when he's going back to the office, he's saying, oh, I have to do this task, and takes me like the system is very slow. Oh, let's talk a little 5 minutes with this other colleague before I do that, because I know it will take long. So there you have also a resistance for the system, which is unconscious, but happens all the time. Like if you know that something will be visible, like the usual human being will push it back, like the last minute. So that is, and it's the same with it. Basically, you are working with the system is your work. The thing with software as a service products is like you are not using it because of your amusement or entertainment. It's like if your work, you have to do it at some point when you have to do it right, which is the other thing. Because to closing back the inconsistent design topic, if you are used to certain flow, and that flow change in the same system in another part of the system, then you will do mistakes because you are expecting the same product to work the same, so the flows to be similar all over the place.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, and that happens a lot because you see people stuck in software all the time. So they simply just don't find a way through it, and it's because different parts of the software, they look different, they behave differently. I've been looking lately to some desktop software, and it's confusing. It's hard to navigate sometimes, especially when you have legacy software that it's being built over many years, and then also the design language changes over time. Then you have you have ancillary components there, or parts of the software that they look in a certain way, and then you have the more modern parts of the software looking in a slightly different way. So you have all these different styles converging together in the experience as the customer have, and that's not always optimal. Sometimes you are confused. How should I do this? How should I? Or sometimes your intuition leads to in this direction. And in the best case, things do not work. In the worst case scenario, you get the output that is not the one that you expect. So you get, you expect that if you click this button and select this thing, it's going to have an X, and then Y happens, and then it's too late to go back. That also happens. So for that reason, I think, at least from the user perspective, from my perspective as a user, is inconsistent design is harmful at times. But again, it depends how bad you need the software.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you get used to inconsistent design if you use the software day to day. So you know that this part of the system you have to outlaw with the small button, on the other part you can drop the file. You learn that because you are using in your daily life, you're using multiple type of software all the time, and they all look different. It doesn't matter. They can also come from the same company. They all look different. So you are kind of used to inconsistency. But if you are using one single product from one single company, then you expect that level of consistency.
Yeah. At least the expectation is there. Yeah.
Yeah, the expectation is there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. No, that's absolutely true. And that also lead us to what I think is, it goes a little bit beyond the scope of only when you're working in a software, say in a desktop, but then what happens with experience when you go from desktop to mobile, right? Or when you're moving from across different devices. That is sometimes, first, it's not, especially for productivity tools, you don't find it too often that there is a mobile implementation of those productivity tools. There's only certain companies who actually have the resources to do that, because obviously, in one ideal world, the whole thing will be responsive and adapt itself, especially if it's a website. But if it's a desktop application, then you see it not that often. But mobile experiences sometimes are hard. Like sometimes you have like the cramped down desktop version on a mobile device, and that doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
What is your
Yeah.
opinion about that thing?
Yeah, well, this is we call that responsive. Like your software have to respond to every screen sizes that you put the software to. So to every platform as well. So the easiest way to do that, and I always recommend that to people that are building software, is like you start with your mobile experience and then you grow that screen. So you start the screen, designer or development, doesn't matter. You started in the smallest size that you want to target, and then you can grow. You can show more things or show things in the different ways, but it's the easiest way, because what is very difficult is starting desktop with a big screen and then figure it out where goes what, because the layouts are different. So they're totally different because you have less space. So and also the interaction is different. Like on your mobile phone, you're using your fingers, so your precision is pretty bad. Like the target where you click or where you tap have to be big enough to work. That's why it's easier if you start designing the mobile experience and then you grow the same screen to 2 or 3 more form factors. That is the easiest way, which is counterintuitive, because when you think about responsive, you think, okay, 50% of the users will use desktop, so we start with desktop. And then for the other 50%, we have to do responsive, which is like what everybody thinks. But if you are building a new product, so please start from the mobile experience and then go to a big screen. There is also one advantage if you start with the mobile experience, that the screens will become clear because you don't have space. So you have to convey the whole task basically in one font screen. So all the elements should be there with a little bit of scrolling, maybe with a little bit of next previews, but it should be all in one small place. So you have to think very good and very deep on how do you display your NAS for sync. For instance, if you have normal form, which in desktop will be like 20 input lines or something, so 20 fields, that will be uncomfortable in mobile. So for that interface to be successful in mobile, then you have to rethink and say, okay, what I really need at this moment for the user. I really need like how many pets they have in their home. You probably don't need that information. You don't have to ask it on mobile. On the other thing that you have to take in account is on mobile, the people are really on the way. So like 80% of the time, if people are using mobile, they are not sitting comfortable somewhere. They are on the way, they are walking, they are cooking, they are watching something. They want to just check something quick, do something quick, move on. So that is the go in, go out. It's that mindset that the user have in that moment.
Yeah, I was what you were saying that I was thinking about, complexity in aspects of mobile design, or especially in applications that span across different form factors. They mobile and tablet, desktop, PC, whatever it is.
Mm.
And the first thing you mentioned is if you are beginning from scratch, and that's an important point, because that's a luxury that many organizations do not have. They already have built something, and
Yes.
usually that something is built first on desktop, and they want to expand and reach their customers where they are. So they figured out, okay, perhaps we should adapt this to mobile. And then you have also applications that are fairly complex. So that there are applications that, I don't know, I'm thinking here, you have an ERP system or you have a CRM system, that those things are complicated. You have a bunch of fields because you have to enter a lot of information. And they usually optimize for desktop.
Yeah.
How would you go about bringing these legacy systems that were originally built to desktop, then in the other direction? If you don't have this green field, you are working in a brown field space.
Yeah.
How would you go about it?
Well, that will depend mostly on the resources, on the priority that you have. Like, for instance, if you have a system that you know for a fact, like 80% of the people are using it for mobile, then it makes sense to do that. But if you have only 20% or 15% or 10% of the users are on mobile, they are probably figuring out with a little bit of zoom in, zoom out, whatever they are doing, they are figuring out. If they are still using it on mobile, they are figuring out. So if you don't have the resources, you don't really have to take care. But if 80% of the users or your use case involves people on the go, that means people in service, people in maintenance, people in,
Could be
I don't
people
know,
in sales.
consulting, sales, etc. That those people are basically on the go. Technicians that have to repair something and that have to have a device with them to track whatever. So if that's your case, then you have to put the resources and put the time and put the priority there, because if you increase the quality of the user experience for your employee, it will benefit your company in the end. So it will return, like the return of investment will be there. Like people will be faster, people will be like the ideal mobile experience, go in, perform the task, go out. That's it. So if you do that for your workers, then it will be nice. Because let's say you have a technician, so an IT technician, internet technician from a telecom company, right? And then they have to track stuff on the phone. If he have to zoom in or navigate 10 pages in a grid, so in a table, that they have to zoom in and scroll left and right to see the whole row, it will take a while to find what he's looking for. But if that same experience is like you have a table on mobile, you can also have tables, but you cannot have like 10 columns. You only can have like 6 or 5 at most. But you have a good search, for instance, on top, then he will find pretty fast what he's looking for. It's like 2 clicks. Tap, search, oh, I find the result, go. Or not like zoom in and then scrolling left and right to see all the information that he needs. So that is one example, for instance.
I think also that there are constraints that are specific to different platforms. I'm thinking now, for instance, there are social networking websites that, in order to connect to other people, you can scan a QR code. And obviously, the desktop version of that website doesn't have that capability of scanning a QR code, because obviously, a desktop computer usually doesn't have a camera, or you don't have that scenario where someone comes with a QR code and then you scan it in front of you, or you take your computer and then you scan the QR code to connect to someone. So that, I think those are situations that really make a difference. Location is another aspect of that. So of course you can gather location from a desktop computer, but usually that is something that makes more sense in a mobile device. You know, you have also the ability to record video and sound. You have a gyroscope. You can change orientation. So there are many things that are definitely different in the different platforms. And I think in some cases, also what you were mentioning, most people who are on the go, they might need to check information. You know, it's not too much about creating content, what they're doing on the go, but it's more checking information. And perhaps all you need is a big button that you need to press and say, yeah, I'm done. You know, this is good.
Yeah, exactly.
But on the desktop, you have a full-blown keyboard. And so you can really type. So I think those are considerations, you know, the peripherals, and also the circumstances where people is using the software, that should be taken into account, and perhaps even realize that, you know, the mobile experience is, again, it's a mobile experience. So people is on the go, they are doing something, and then it definitely should be slightly different than a desktop device. But I think it depends from case to case, you know, what is best. But yeah, I think that's definitely something to keep in mind. Especially, I was thinking it's super complicated, because I was playing the other day doing some UI work. It's been a while that I don't do that, and then I realized that you could just change the orientation, and that messes your layout.
Yeah. If
Even
you
if
don't
you
meet
are,
it the right way, it will throw it out the window.
yeah, and then it's like, okay, even for this device, which you think is fixed now, if you change the orientation, then you have to make a call. You have to say, well, I do not accept changes of orientation, or I have to, again, even in that form factor, I have to design for both things. So it can get pretty complex to work for different form factors, which leads me to.
No, before we move to the next point, there is one advantage when you are targeting mobile. It's like a viewer is mentioning, you have the whole array of sensors. Like, for instance, if you're a service worker, when you have a system for looking like the customer, why not use your location where you are? When I show you only the customer is in a 10-kilometer radius where you are. So you only have like 5 on the screen, or you don't have 100. And then the first one is in Hamburg. And the one that you are looking is in Munich, which is at the last of the list. So if you have that feature, you won't even see the Hamburg clients. You will see the clients are near you. So they are probably the ones that you want to reach, or the ones that you want to visit, or the ones that are actually on your list. That is something that you can do. Or in the other thing that some companies are doing is like input of information via pictures. Like, you have a form, or you have to collect something, or you have to check the status of some equipment. Instead of typing the values with your thumbs, you just take a picture, and then the system in there, it will figure it out. We have somebody else who will actually see the picture, type the information comfortably in a keyword as a cheap solution, or they have an OCR solution that will actually recognize what it is in the picture, all the text, when you fill the forms, we fill the data in the database accordingly. For instance, for the end user, it's pretty quick. Instead of spending 10 minutes typing a form, we just picture that, and then the system will figure it out.
Yeah, that's, you know, with the advent now of AI, you could certainly have more components that they leverage AI, speech recognition, OCR, or image recognition, to ease the usage of the applications. However, I think in a scenario where you are, say, when you want responsiveness, even if now the state of the art of speech recognition and vision are pretty good, it's certainly annoying when they don't work the way you expect. So so I think, and especially if you are in noisy conditions or low light conditions, and that happens when you are on the go, because in the office things tend to work properly. You are wearing headsets and you have a good microphone, but if you are on the go, then those are aspects that one should keep in mind, that is not only about the capabilities of those systems, it's also that you're going to have more noise, and it's going to be definitely a moving target.
Yeah, the last point is basically you have to imagine if the service user, they have a tool in one hand and the mobile phone in the other one. So it should work with one hand. It should work pretty easily.
Yeah, and this brings us to a subject that is also super important. Now that you have all these tools like AI and object recognition and changing form factors and the different conditions that people are going to use the application, to the accessibility subject, because I think that's something that many applications do not, especially business applications, are not extremely focused on accessibility. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that? Because I think that's a really broad and also definitely super important subject.
Yes, and it's become more and more important. Like, I mean, if you are servicing public stuff like governments or public institutions, you have to be accessible. So most of the countries in the world, they have by law, the software that they use have to be accessible. That may be for your business a critical decision. Like if you are not accessible, you cannot access those type of customers. Maybe that is your target customer, so you have to be accessible anyway. For more, let's say, consumer software, but we are talking about the software as a service here. Let's say you are not serving the public sector. So basically is you can get away with the lack of accessibility. But the lack of accessibility is not like people think like, oh, I have the white theme, like the light theme and the dark theme, and that's accessible. No, it's not. So you have to also have a high contrast theme for people who are not seeing that clear. In both directions, you have to have a light on a dark high contrast theme. You have to support like increasing the text size of your software. Like if you're using the web as platform, you can basically in the browser say increase the size of the font. And if you are not prepared for that, the layout will break horribly. So everything else will stay in place, and only the text will grow, and it will overflow all the boxes that you have in your layout and all the nicest things that your designer designed. If you implement it that way, that the layout or the elements on the interface grow with the size proportionate to the size of the text, then that will be broken. This is also one aspect of accessibility. Without mentioning all the nitty-gritty details, like the contrast will be sufficient all over the place, so you don't kind of have like blue text over blue. That's an extreme example over blue. A background. I mean, you can have if the blue background is really, really, really light, and the blue text is really, really, really dark. Like you have like the contrast that you still can read.
Like I used to see a lot of what was that yellow fonts on blue background, and then the fonts were thin, and then you barely could see the whole thing. So that's
so basically it's like the fonts will be dancing for the people who have disabilities. The fonts will be dancing, or they only will see a blob of yellow without anything else. So yeah, that is a problem. So the use of colors, contrast is pretty important. Like font size, you can see a couple of software that you can get too close to the screen to actually see what the text say or what the input lines say or what whatever. It's really, sometimes it's really difficult for that. When you have, I mean, there is a lot of aspect for that, like interactive elements. Like you cannot drag a column in your table using only the pixel that you're using for the line in the column. Like, no, you have to make the draggable target a little bit wider, because nobody is so precise to pinpoint the pixel to drag that. And if that is part of your day-to-day work, because for it, that is actually an actual example that somebody complained to me in the software that they use at their work. Is like the default state of the table. It's basically you don't see half of the information in the column, so you have to expand the column. When the column is as I was describing, like you have to pinpoint that pixel and then drag that pixel. So that's pretty difficult. If you have to do that like 40 times of the day, you will be throwing your mouse against the screen at some point, because it's infuriating.
Yeah, there are yeah, there are things like looking at the other day, also something that has a scroll, and then had a scroll bar inside of a bigger page. But then when you hit the end of that scroll bar, then it then scrolls the whole other thing. And when you're scrolling with your finger, you just can't stop. I mean, you can barely stop when you're scrolling with your with the mouse, but you just definitely can't stop when you're scrolling with your finger. And so it gets super complicated. And I guess if someone has some kind of motor disability,
Yeah.
then it's really hard for this person to actually pinpoint what is the right height of the scroll, or what I want to have, the content that I want to read. So yeah. And then the subject that comes really often is like, many men have color blindness. So between red and green, and there are many applications that do not have any awareness. And I think this is one of the aspects of what makes sense. Well, if you are enterprise software, perhaps you want to have more blue colors and kind of the kind of colors that that statistically chances are less that you're going to find people that have color blindness, and then they cannot differentiate between the shades that you have.
Color blindness is, I mean, if you want to be accessible, you cannot rely on simple one method of visualization of information. Like for instance, if you have error message, warning messages on success messages, right? So the common sense will be error will be red, warning will be yellowish brown, and then success will be green, right? But if we are only relying on color information, you're displaying the text in the color that I just described, right? Depending on the text as you are, if it's a long sentence, like you successfully save it, document A in the flow, B will be approved by blah. That all that you're using color to is actually a success message. But if you cannot rely, like if you're not seeing, if the user is not seeing colors very well, they cannot rely on the color information, because they cannot see it. They have to read the whole thing again. In that case, for one of the solution is like you use an icon. So at some point on the interface, you have your color, that's fine. Your text is also fine, but just add an icon. So the same icon for error, the same icon for warning, or the same icon for success. So when people see it the first time, they see the icon and they realize, okay, this is the icon for success. So the things that I was doing a minute ago that took me like 30 minutes to fill in, it worked. They don't have to actually, it's saved correctly in the folder that we are designed to save. So basically, that will, on people will actually be faster. Like, okay, I see the icon, I don't have to read the message, I know it worked. So.
Yeah, that's true. And then you also see in a lot of systems that a lot of our organizations have this traffic light system to sort things. These things are bad, and we are going to add a red thing. And the only way that that they indicate that these are the things that are not doing well is because they have a red bar somewhere. or the background is kind of reddish, and then everything that is going fine is greenish. But
Yeah.
if you have color blindness, then you are not going to be able to see anything. And that's actually a pretty common practice, to have this traffic light way of categorizing things to know, how they are doing. And so I think people have to be aware. The other thing is that sometimes the designers still, they use icons, but they emphasize the color. So they assume that the main differentiator is going to be the color. And so the icon is somehow tiny there. Yeah, you have a little cross, or you have a little exclamation sign, but it's not as dominant as, say, the color that is around it. And then again, if you have color blindness, then you might just skip that part. And again, going back to the visual, because most of the software that we are dealing with is visual. It's also important, especially if you are building web applications, to include all the alt text alternative descriptions of all the components. So if you have a screen reader, for instance, the screen reader can deal with that. You see it also very often that the alt elements are not included. So if you turn on the screen reader, someone needs to use the screen reader, then basically they're flying blind, so that you don't, it just doesn't work. So these are things that I think almost everyone could do. And again, as you mentioned at the beginning, if you're doing something for government organizations, most of the time this is a must. So this is not something that you can circumvent. This is a must in order to get approved for government.
We haven't touched keyboard navigation. Like, it's nothing more annoying. Like, if you're used to, I come from the old school, like MS-DOS and whatever, and you press tab to access stuff. So we didn't have a mouse at the beginning. So basically,
or the cable
I'm
got
used
broken.
to navigate with tab. All the interface.
Yeah, or the cable was broken. It didn't work.
Yeah, it's nothing more annoying. Like, you have to focus on this element. When you press tab, when you expect to go to the next focus element that is there, but it jumps to another place in the page, or even scroll down and then put you in some other place in the page. And this is actually pretty easy doable. So if you have using the web again as delivery, as your platform, then you can just annotate the HTML elements and say, okay, this is tab order 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you go navigate like 1, 2, 3, 4 in the order that your flow is designed, or the logical order that the user should use. That will be a lot of help for a lot of people.
Yeah, and sometimes some applications, especially the applications that they require intensive use of the keyword, they have these sheets of the shortcuts. And that's, I found that extremely useful. There are applications built, especially lately, I've seen a lot of applications built that they don't have, or they are not super focused in these power users that use the keyword a lot. They assume that you're going to use a pointing device that is going to be either the mouse, or it's going to be your fingers, or whatever it is. And they skip that part, and you don't have the ability to go to certain shortcuts with the keyword. And especially if you are doing like software development or something that you need to really copy, and there's a lot of applications that you move in text back and forth, then I think makes a lot of sense to have this cheat sheet of shortcuts that you can use to manipulate information only with the keyword, because it's, once you get proficient, you get much faster with the keyword.
Yeah, definitely it's much faster. It's most focused. Like, you don't have to navigate with your mouse there. You just press tab 3 times and you are there.
Yeah, exactly.
So something like that.
Yeah, and that's super important, and that also combined with the ability to offer other ways to interact, to have voice, and to have even video sometimes, or image recognition. I think that helps a lot. Which again, just to connect to the next topic that we wanted to talk about, bring us to how to get help. It's like having these cheat sheets, it helps, and it helps you to navigate. And some applications, when you get started, sometimes they have a wizard that they kind of guide you through the whole jungle on how to find things. But many times it's almost impossible to find things in many applications. And that touches on the point of documentation. Now, today, I mean, like this year, we have a new revolution coming, which is all these co-pilots. Now you see a lot of companies investing in co-pilots that are supposed to help people in their enterprise workflows. And then that might definitely be a new way for people to interact with this help support instances within the application. But in many cases, it's very hard to navigate B2B or enterprise applications. So what are your thoughts about the whole documentation and supporting the customer, trying to find, beyond obviously the fact that it has to be everything that we saw before, you know, accessible and responsive and consistent, you know, beyond all these things? How do you go about funding the documentation?
Well, let's start by the documentation. So who needs documentation? So if you have, you may think that you have a self-explanatory product, right? That your product doesn't need documentation. But that is actually a mistake. Like, the documentation is not always to explain the technicalities, like under this menu, you can do this action. It's also to educate your users, in this case, SaaS users, about the business cases that they could solve using your product. Like you start the documentation I have seen that work pretty well is like they illustrate stuff with use cases, with business use cases. Like, how do you do segmentation, or how do you create something like a list of contacts in a CRM? For what purpose you can create for this, you will then use this simple format. If you want to export that or do whatever you want for whatever reason, different kind of list, you can do it in this other way. So it's not only to explain the technicalities, it's to also instruct and educate your users about business use case, if you're doing the documentation right. That is from the point of view of the business. From the point of view of the end user, it like 95% of the time it works like this. The user will try to figure it out on their own without reading any text on the screen, just clicking the biggest call to action in the screen that sounds kind of what they want to do, or what they imagine that thing will do that relate to their task. And then we click away till they encounter an error. If they encounter an error, they're gonna backtrack a couple of steps and try to do it again in a slightly different manner. If they still encounter an error the third time, then they will go to the documentation, and only then. And that is, I am not lying, but usually will be like 95% of the time. So
That's
people don't read the documentation.
No, people certainly don't. But I think now with all these smart agents, I wonder if it would make sense to change a little bit how people experience all these things, because now you can have these conversational experiences, and so the agent might be, for instance, aware of what you are doing and might tell you, oh, you know what, perhaps, you know, usually when people do this and this, they do that. Is that what you are intending to do? Because right now, many of these help agents, they tend to be this little button in your lower right or left side of your screen.
Yeah.
And they are reactive. So they are not proactive. They just wait for you to go there. And usually people just don't go and click and try to ask them something. And especially because people know that these agents, you know, they are kind of sketchy. But
yeah, exactly. They don't work properly.
Yeah, but this new generation is certainly different. And so I have, I wonder if this should change in some way, if these agents should now be proactive and tell you, oh, you know what, I believe you're trying to do this. Am I right? And then you engage in a conversation with them. And then up to what extent within that, I recall a few years ago, the name for that was conversational user interface. I think now the term is now not in vogue anymore. It's not what people use, but I recall for 5 years or so, conversational user interface was the thing. And the idea is, if from those user interfaces, you could just trigger the process that you're looking for, or at least lead the process. And I think that's a different way to think about documentation and how to lead people, because it saves a lot of time if you don't have to read the documentation.
If you don't have to read the documentation, people will love that. Basically, what I'm seeing in the transition point, if we transition to fully conversational UX, like we will do at some point, it will be a mixture. You have an assistant, and then you can, in the ideal case, and imagining here, you have an assistant on top. You still have your system in the usual that you can use with point and click and do all the stuff. But on top of that, you're gonna have an assistant, a small window on top of that other big system, which is just going to tell you, oh, I have this business problem. How do I solve this business problem with this system? In that case, the copilot or whatever the assistant will do is like guide you through the system that is behind, and say, okay, you can go to that screen. On that screen, you can create a new database with this data structure. Then you have to connect that with this other system that you have. When you do that in this way, so basically it's the same information on the same flows from the documentation, but there will be like step-by-step guide on the fly, tailored to your question, on your problem, on top of an existing system. That is definitely coming sooner than later, till we already migrate everything to you just talk to the computer.
Yeah, I think that's probably something that is coming. And I think also it helps a lot to have not only documentation in terms of video, in terms of text. I think it helps a lot sometimes just to see a short tutorial that guides you. I certainly find, but that's my personal opinion, I certainly find annoying when I'm being guided through a wizard that shows me the kind of freezes the user interface and comes with a bubble here and then there, and then you have to kind of follow through. I find that annoying. Some people might like that. There's a reason why there's so much of that. I wonder how much A/B testing and actually analytics of the usage of the applications is out there. I don't think there's a lot, especially in the B2B space. I think you see more A/B testing and checking that people actually understand what they are supposed to do in the B2C space. And
most of the time they are doing it wrong. Like what this, let's say, guided experience would do is like explain you the concept. Like, okay, you can create here a new document, and the document can be an Excel or a spreadsheet, a document, or whatever, right? From this button here. But what they usually do is like they point to a save button, and they say, you can save here. Of course I can save here. It says save. When it's a button, I can click that and save. So most of the time it's pointless. The information that they point to you, it's pointless. So they should help you navigate the system or the screen that you are, but through using the concept from your business, not explaining you the interface. The interface is like the people will figure it out after the third time they use it. They will know most of the buttons for what they are after they click on that. But actually understanding the concepts behind the system, that is what is for me important in this case.
Yeah, that's funny. Now that you were saying that, I was thinking, after going through this list of points, what would happen if you do everything wrong from the point of view of UX in an application. Like if you don't have a mobile experience, if you don't have any accessibility, if just the navigation sucks, if everything is wrong, perhaps you might even have a very successful business too. but yeah, there's a lot of that can go wrong here. And I was thinking, what is the price? What is the price of getting all these UI or user experience elements wrong? What happens when people just don't follow these guidelines when they just release the products that way? Because honestly, you know, in the B2B space, it's certainly wild. So it's it's certainly wild because it's really task or goal oriented, but at the same time, and for understandable reasons, there is not a lot of analytics being gathered on people actually using the software, because of course many companies don't want to be tracked what they're doing. But that leads to a situation where many of the decisions made in terms of how better to design a product are made in the gut instead of based on numbers, instead of based on, you know, data-driven decision making. So there's a lot of that, and then
the price that you pay. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay. You were asking the price that you pay if you do all things UX wrong, right? So the price that you pay is the following: if someone else come with half of the feature that you have, but the interface is better, and people understand it better, they're gonna switch in a blink. So if it's a software as a service, they're just gonna take out their credit card and put it somewhere else. It's that easy. Unless you have to migrate
well, it's a B2B application. So I think that's the complicated part in the whole equation. And I think that's also what makes what relieves, in my opinion, the pressure of vendors in this aspect, that they know, well, I have lock-in because I have your business data or your business processes running on my platform, and therefore
that's one thing.
And therefore I can afford to do that. But I think the make or break moment is the next topic that we wanted to touch on, which is when you roll out updates and then things break, and then the experience changes in a dramatic way for the next version. And that's something that I think most people who build enterprise software know, that you have to have this progressive release or announcements when you are going to make changes to your software. But especially now with SaaS solutions, you know, before with desktop, you had always the choice to skip a version. You know, you could always say, you know, I skip a version, or I could just deploy that to a sandbox within my enterprise, and then I can have a test group that is testing the software, and then we can do a global rollout in the organization when we are sure that this is still working the way we expect, or it's compliant, or, you know, whatever requirement the company may have. But now in the SaaS world, you have a web SaaS, and then now you deploy the whole thing, and now you make a change, and the change affects all your customers. It's much harder on a SaaS product to, you know, have this kind of escalonated step-by-step rollouts. So how would you go about those things, which sometimes are necessary? Sometimes you have to update your application.
Yes, you have to update your application all the time. You have to release new features. You have to improve new features in the UX. You have to improve the flows. You have to simplify sometimes. You have to make some flows more complex because you have new features for that flow, for instance. But basically, it all boils down to inform the user. Like, don't change things dramatically at once. That is one thing. Like, you cannot do like if you're a software as a service that you just deployed on the web, when you are using the web as platform, you can do releases basically whenever you want, probably if you are set up that way. So don't do one big release a year and change everything. That will bring people mad, and they will set it back like one week at least. They have to adapt to the new thing. Just do incremental improvement. Like, there's barely so people won't notice. Like, change this detail, this new feature. When you have a new feature, announce it. Put it in a different part of the application or a different part of the flow, that people notice that it's a new thing. But don't make like 1 year version release or whatever, like they were doing in the era of desktop applications. Like, you upgrade to a new one every year, something like that. Like, you can do incremental increases. You can release a new feature when you have the feature ready, release that. If you have a hot fix because you find a bug, which this happens all the time, just release that fix, but also announce it. So don't make a big change and then announce it afterwards. And then when people go into the office the next day and they encounter a totally new system that they have to adapt again. So that will decrease their productivity a lot.
Yeah, it's like today in the morning I was working out, and then when I look at my watch, I use an app to track my tasks, so my daily tasks.
Yeah.
And I had a complication on my watch that is, this app, so it's synchronized with my phone. And today they just changed the complication. And I'm looking at my phone and say, oh, what happened? I have to restart my watch, and then I'm restarting my watch, and I think, oh, stuff broke, and now I'm concerned because I really like to, and then it's just why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? And this is just a consumer app, but this particular app is important for me. It's important for my workflow and the way I organize myself. So imagine if that happens for something that it's critical for your productivity, it's critical for some business process. So breaking things, it affects really how people, especially you might think that you might have done things better, but you need to first have this progressive rollout, and try with to have like a private beta, or you have an alpha and you have a private beta, and then you have a beta, and then you finally make a release. So you really need to have a progressive way or process to make these new releases and prepare people, and prepare people actually in advance, announce, we are retiring this feature, and this feature is now deprecated, and expect certain changes in at least 6 months in advance, so people can actually make up their minds and adjust their flows and make sure that they stay productive, because at the end of the day, they get your software because they want to be productive.
Yeah, exactly. They are using your software because your software is solving a business problem somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not like they are playing solitaire with your SaaS software, because I haven't seen a SaaS software.
Hopefully they are not.
I haven't seen a SaaS software that you can play solitaire on top of it.
Hopefully they're not, but you never know. So
no,
yeah.
You don't know. There's nothing new under the sun. So.
Yeah, you never know. So but it's definitely something important. And again, that thing that happened this morning that really reminded me that unexpected updates, and especially breaking the experience. Yeah, because it's what happened. It just broke the experience. And then I was looking at, well, what are the new complications that they have? And then I'm looking through the list, and none of them. So they went and they delete the one that I was using, just like that. It's not that they just change the order or add new ones. And then going back to different form factors, this is one case on how to do things wrong, then they are not consistent between the handheld device and the watch. So in the handheld device, the phone, you have still the same experience, right? And then that experience in the watch is now completely different. So again, usually, I don't think there are many business applications that have a watch application, but this is one case where, there was an update, inconsistency, not really, there is no this experience across devices is not consistent. So yeah, when it happens, at the very least, it's annoying. At the very least.
Yeah, when you imagine you go to work this morning, or I used to do things this way, and then you open your system, you cannot not do it the same way because the interface changed. So you have to adapt now. So that's awful. So unfortunately, software developer companies with SaaS product do that all the time. They are improving stuff, that's right. So most of the time they are improving the flow, improving the experience, but it's easier for everybody if they do it incrementally or not this big change. Like you were mentioning, like the thing that you are using years till now, it's now gone. So it doesn't exist anymore. It's really annoying.
No,
and I think with that, we can just wrap it up.
Yeah, we can wrap this up on that note. Don't break things.
Don't break things.
That's the final note. Don't break things, which is hard, but don't do it. So with that, we are wrapping that. We are coming next week with another exciting topic. I think user experience is definitely something that you have to keep in mind. There's, especially, I think now you're going to observe there's already a lot of competition in the SaaS space. And I think that's an important thing to differentiate yourself, to have really a consistent, and to offer the best experience possible to the end customers, especially if you can make a point that because of your investment and user experience, you make your customers more productive. They can achieve more. So that's definitely a selling point, not just that you have nice colors and the right fonts, but that they are more productive, they achieve more. They really it's not an annoyance to go through that experience to get their job done. So on that note, I don't know if you have any closing words.
No, just keep in mind, like, if your product have a better user experience than the competition, you will definitely win in the long run, together with marketing. Good user experience, good marketing, that will win. Yeah,
I also think so. So see you in the next one, and I hope you enjoyed this one. Till then, bye-bye.
See you next week. Bye-bye.